Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to More Than a Coach. I am here live with the coach, the Mr. Vince Anderson. He is really, truly my hero. This guy has been a true inspiration and force in my life before my life took a turn, but even, when I was coaching in high school and when I went to USTFCCA certification, I remember, every morning I would bring Coach Anderson coffee. That was just my way to try to pick his brain. And he would graciously sit there and sip coffee with me every morning. So any coaches out there, sometimes you're wondering how can you, get information and learn how to connect with other coaches. Sometimes it's just as simple as having coffee with somebody and getting to know them. And I would say that Coach Anderson and I have become really, really close friends over the years. And in my situation that am still working myself through, I always say Coach Anderson was just that bright light in my dark time. People don't know that about him, just how compassionate of a person he is. We all know him as a tremendous coach, but he's a tremendous person who has the biggest heart. And every single day, in the very beginning and every single week. There's not a week that goes by that Coach Anderson doesn't send me like just the simplest text just to make sure that I'm okay. And I truly just want to thank you for that publicly, Coach Anderson, because there'd be times that I didn't know how I would make it through, and you just send me a picture of this, like a sun emoji, and say the sun is shining outside. And I'm like, I'm not going outside to see it, but thank you for the emoji. So I appreciate you. Thank you, Coach Anderson. Welcome.
Well, Coach Gibson, you're one of my heroes. You're an American treasure, and you serve so many people. I'm just happy to be here and glad to call you a friend. It's an honor.
It's my honor, Coach. My honor to be here with Coach Anderson. 36 years of coaching, like the knowledge that you have acquired in 36 years is just a national treasure right here for everybody to have an opportunity to hear from you. So we're going to dive right in, but I want to just kind of point out really quick some of the athletes that Coach Anderson has had the opportunity to coach in the 36 years that he's been a coach. One of the most winningest track and field coaches. I remember when Texas A&M did what was it? It wasn't a triple double. What was it, Coach?
There's a triple double. It was Coach Henry's teams at LSU won the men's title and women's title one year in the same year. And then they came back the next year and did the same thing. And that had never been done before. So at A&M, we did that for a year, and then we came back and matched it. We defended both titles the second year, and then we did it a third time. Our men and women won in the same year in 2009, 2010, and 2011. So the men won 3 straight, and the women won 3 straight in the same 3 years. And that had never been.
Wow. Well, we're going to talk about the aspects that add to the physical performances. A lot of times people look at coaches and they think that it's all about the physical performance, that a coach gets a physically talented athlete and that's basically their golden ticket to winning championships. But through many conversations that we've had, there are other intangibles that take place and take a part in that championship formula. So from your experience as a coach, what are some of the things that you've encountered that, like, when an athlete has things going on in their personal life and how that impacts their ability to practice at a high level or ability to perform at a high level?
Well, there were a lot of things. First of all, I came to coaching with no prior experience. I came from a whole nother life. I was an architect, and I always loved sport, but I can't emphasize this enough. The way that I think as a fan and the way fans think could not be more polar opposite than the way coaches have to think. So it took me a long time it took me years to strip away all the preconceptions that I had as a fan of sport, because I think that restricts one's coaching development. It certainly restricted mine, because when you go into coaching, you think things like, well, I'm going to have to motivate everybody, and I'm going to have to put a boot in everybody's butt, and I'm going to have to be a taskmaster, and I'm going to have to humble athletes. And nothing could be further from the truth. Athletes have unbelievably low self-esteem, and female
Mm,
athletes in general, I'm going to excuse my language. Female athletes, they think they're shit.
mm,
Even and every single one of them is beautiful and amazing and has all these gifts, and they're funny and they're smart and they're beautiful, and they think they're garbage. So you have to spend all of this effort, how can I put this? Validating their personhood so that their view of themselves starts to be more accurate. And men don't have the low opinion of themselves like the women do. But that's a problem with guys too. Guys, don't think that doesn't exist. Everyone's self-esteem as a college athlete, it needs to catch up to themselves. And there's a lot of ways you can do that by just basically treating them with respect and in kind of a serving kind of loving way. If you're consistent with that, that seems to help them find their self a little easier. And the more help you have with that at home or from their circle of friends, or whatever, the easier that is. Now, as you know, with female athletes, almost without exception, the problem is they're being undermined within their own circle. The girls that they compete with on campus for dates with guys are tearing them down, or someone in their circle of friends is tearing them down, or their mother is tearing them down, or their friends
mm,
at home are tearing them down. Or usually it's someone in their inner circle who is disrupting their life in a way that makes them question who they are. And I think that everybody's challenge in college, it certainly was mine. I mean, you're trying to find yourself. You're trying to find who you are. You're trying to find your voice. You're trying to find your personhood. You're trying to find your style. You're trying to find what's true for you so you can live in that truthfully. I mean, it's a hard search. So, anyway, with guys, that search has to do more, I think, with also learning who they are, because guys, we're not very smart. We don't know a lot. I mean, so we have to become smarter. We have to know ourselves. We're not brought up to be, generally speaking, we're not brought up to be emotionally aware of ourselves. And that's a real growth potential, because, we as guys, we hurt people because we don't know
mm.
who we are. And we're not that vile, but we're emotionally immature, and people who don't know who they are can, they can cause a lot of pain until they start to get their act together. And that's the more the guys struggle, and um so with guys, you have to, how can I put this, you have to, you know hopefully they're getting this backed up at home and with their friends, but a lot of times they're not. So you have to do things like
Right.
treat women respectfully in front of them so they can begin to learn how to do that. And just, it's all kind of things, but it has to do more, with just kind of being yourself in a respectful way, and kind of let that be one visible example that they see every day. And I never went out to practice or to coach my group with the weight of the world on my shoulders, thinking, my God, if I don't deliver these guys from themselves, it's not that much pressure. It's just, you go out just saying, you realize athletes are they're very obedient, and they want to be very obedient. And they will certainly become obedient and allow you to teach them and guide them and help them if you act in a consistent way that they can bank on. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be consistent, and it has to be true. You can't. I I say this a lot when I go to coaching clinics when we talk about it. There's a huge latitude on how you can be. I'm talking about coaching. This would apply to anything, I guess, running a restaurant or being a pastor. There's a lot of latitude on how to be successful, but I think an absolute requirement is that your coaching persona matches your personhood. Very famously, I knew that there was I don't want to call any names. A lot of people think or assume that you have to, like, let's say whoever you happen to be, that you have to adopt a particular coaching persona that matches a particular caricature that maybe you think the way a coach should be. There's some very soft-spoken, introspective coaches who are amazing. Gary Winkler. There's some insanely, wildly profane screamers like Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, who's successful. There are coaches who get enraged and in the face of athletes like Nick Saban. And there's really gentle, respectful coaches like Steve Kerr. And all of those people are wildly successful. So my assumption is that that's kind of the people that they are. And they're being a coach within the context of who they already are. The problems start to come in because athletes people, not just athletes, and athletes are people, but athletes can detect what's fake and what's not true. And consistency and learning that the coach is an extension of the person that you are. Like, athletes will forgive your weaknesses and your foibles and the things you're not good at, as long as you're true as long as you're true.
Right.
So when you don't have to be perfect. It's kind of like the ads they say on the public service announcements they say on the radio. You don't have to be perfect to be a parent. You just have to care. You have to love. You have to be consistent.
Oh my gosh. So now you made me think of a quote that I use when I do speeches. You said something to me one day in a conversation. You said, we don't have to like them all, but we have to love them.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. How do we love the kids or the athletes, the people that we're working with that we don't like per se?
It's hard because some of them are assholes. And there's a lot of kids that I haven't liked. But this is what's really strange. I didn't ask for this. It's the way it feels. The ones that I don't like are the ones that keep me up at night, because those are the ones that I'm worried about I'm going to find dead in the gutter. They're the ones that keep me up. See, the ones that so you have to love them, because I don't want anyone going down on my watch.
Right.
So, there've been a few that they're a handful, but I try never to. I mean, they're a person too. They're allowed their mistakes. They're allowed their time to get their act together. I wish it would happen sooner because you're busting my ass, but come on, I'm waiting on you. Please get your act together. But those are the ones that I worry about, because you also, with them, you worry that not only you worry that you're not reaching them, of course, for their betterment, but because you're having trouble reaching them, you assume that other people maybe are having the same difficulty, and this might be a pattern in their life. So you're just trying to do the best you can, but there's no way. I've coached probably, I'm guessing a rough number would be, in 36 years, I've coached probably about somewhere between 250 and 300 different people. So to assume that you'd like all of them is ridiculous. Just the sheer mathematics of it mean that, there's going to be a lot of people in there you don't like. And some of them, it's a real struggle even to respect. But you have to do that. You have to respect them. You have to help bring them along. You have to set boundaries and guidelines and try to be the best you can with them. And like I say, you can the ones that I dislike the most, or the ones that I like the least, are the ones that I worry about the most,
Right.
because I
Right.
think because those are the ones that it feels like they're untethered in the world. And if you're untethered in the world,
And
some bad.
sometimes they have things that happened in their past, like trauma that's occurred in their
Yes.
childhood, that makes them the person that is hard to like. And sometimes it's that barrier that they've learned to build up around themselves to protect. It's a form of protection. A kid who's been abused or who's been neglected, they built this force field around themselves because they learn that it hurts to let people in. So then they become like porcupines, to where they're going to hurt you before you can hurt them.
Yes. Sure.
So it's
Sure.
a defense mechanism. How have you found ways to get the most out of those kids? Because I found that sometimes those are the ones that will fight the hardest for you if you break through that rough exterior. They're the ones that will truly flourish. So how have you found a way to get through to some of those kids or those athletes who have that rough exterior?
Well, generally, I mean, I don't think there's any one strategy, but generally my strategy is to try to be myself every day and show interest to everyone, which I do, and let them sort of start maybe gravitating a little to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to sort of go forward into those people's lives and say, "Hey, man, I'm here to help you." You're like, "Yeah." I mean, that's easy to say and you mean it, but it's harder to believe and act on. So I sort of try to, through consistency and how can I put it? I'm going to use some common language now. I hate to use cliche, but if over time your consistency shows that you are a safe place and that you've created a safe place, the feeling that I get living in that situation, which I have many times, we all have as coaches, I'm not unique in that regard, feels like this. It feels like consistency of behavior or consistency of group rules begins to create the feeling of a safe place.
Mm,
And people
right.
and then people begin to relate and plug in. But that takes time.
Right. That
And
consistency is important. Even people who have come out of jail will say, they look for that consistency. And it's crazy. They don't want to be in jail, but when they get released from jail, they're looking for that consistency because
sure,
they realize that that's a part of what they've been missing from their lives.
sure. And it doesn't
So,
feel like, well, I am helping this person, or what it feels like what it feels like from my perspective is I'm creating a safe place because I'm for
exactly.
sure not letting their teammates get on their butts.
Yeah.
Like if someone's going to get on them, I'm going to do that, and
Right.
but my point, it feels like a safe space is being created, and then that the starts maybe drawing a better version or a more hopeful version of that person out.
Have you ever had an athlete deal with performance anxiety?
No, never.
Why is this not a thing that we talk about?
Well, first of all, a huge percentage of them are. I mean, I'm not going to say half, but maybe a third to a half in that range. And that's every year. And having performance anxiety, I'm convinced you can teach someone how to be a competitor in most cases. Obviously, no one can teach something to everybody, but teaching someone to be a competitor, it is a teachable skill. Now, it's most easily learned when you have an alpha on your team who says, I'm lacing up my shoes today, guys, let's go get them. Or I'm lacing up my shoes today, girls, let's go. Because what happens then is in that group that has performance anxiety, some of them, you can learn courage from being around it. And what you notice is if you
Right.
have that alpha that sometimes some of the kids who weren't, they were previously on the fringes or whatever, all of a sudden they start getting real brave because they know, Akeem Olajuwon is lacing up his shoes, or you saw it, you see it. I've seen it happen in the Olympic Games, with Usain. Usain goes nuts, starts winning the 100, and the whole Jamaican team all of a sudden gets courageous and lit. And we've all seen that in our own team. Somebody, you lead off the day. That's why the 4x1 is so important. It comes early in the track meet. You drop a good 4x1, the whole team is galvanized.
It sets the tone for the whole meet.
Sets the whole team off on a direction that you love. It's that synergy. So in the same way, but it's easiest to learn that from watching someone else. However, a coach can do a lot to intervene if you don't have that alpha, or even with the stragglers who won't fall in behind the alpha, you can still, you can really teach into that void. And a lot of that is the simple explanation. Athletes don't understand. Like, there's nothing worse. We live in a society that is, I can't, our society, American society, doesn't even know what courage is. It makes me so sad, because if you ask 100 Americans what courage is, 85 of them will say not being afraid. Okay. Love is the absence of fear. Courage cannot exist unless fear is present. Courage is the act of counteracting fear with action. So the guy who says, I'm not afraid to jump off the bridge, and jumps off the bridge, that's not courage. That's craziness. It's, pathology. The guy who says, I'm scared to jump off the bridge, and jumps off the bridge, that's courage. So when you begin to teach athletes that everyone is afraid, and see, ESPN won't tell you Michael Jordan is afraid, but he is. LeBron James has butterflies. He's afraid. He just counteracts that with action. He performs in spite of the fear and uncertainty. Akeem Olajuwon famously said, he was pulled out of the layup line in 1994 before the game 7. And Jim Gray says, is there any doubt about the outcome tonight? And what do most guys say? Some BS answer like, we got this. There's no doubt. But that's not what Olajuwon said. Olajuwon goes, well, of course, there's always doubt about the outcome, but there'll be no doubt about my effort tonight. And I fell off the couch, because I said, before the game started, I said, they're going to win, because that's exactly where it's at. And of course, they did win. And I tell my team this all the time. I say, look, is there any doubt about the outcome tonight? Don't answer that question. Go home all summer and ponder that question, and come back and answer it in the fall. You couldn't answer it any better than Olajuwon did with the whole summer to think about it. And he had the poise to say that before game 7, when everything is in a knot.
Right.
So it really is courage, and this idea that everything comes down to the willingness of you to put forth effort in your race plan pattern. That's all you can do.
So what about a person who, say that again, Coach?
And that's very helpful. Like, that's a very liberating thing. I mean, your focus only needs to be on one thing, which you have practiced and prepared to do. And when you learn to focus on that one thing, it gets easier to compete successfully. Now, a switch doesn't get thrown. It doesn't happen all at once, but like an acquired skill for anything, with continued application, it starts to take and become characteristic of your behavior.
Right. Now, I've seen some athletes who were trying, they're putting in the effort, and they, may have things that are going on, like anxiety, pre-existing anxiety, which actually turns into performance anxiety. And I've actually seen some athletes who, like, it looks like asthma, but then through further discovery, you find out that it's really panic attacks that they're having while they're running, to where they're just trying too hard. So I've seen some things where it says try easier, don't try too hard. Don't put so much pressure on yourselves. It goes back to what you said at the beginning about self-esteem. Our self-esteem is shot, and then we're putting pressure on ourselves. Our parents are fussing at us because they think we should be doing one thing and we're not meeting up to their expectations.
Right.
And then now it's counterproductive. We're working against ourselves and getting worse rather than getting better.
Right. Yeah, no,
What
you're
would you
right.
say to a coach what would you say to a coach who is dealing with an athlete like that, and they're only addressing the physical part and not addressing the mental part that is obviously going on?
Okay, well, I would have conferences with, the occasional athlete who maybe I thought was in those ranges, and just ask, how things are going, what is going on, something's happening, can you let me in on that a little bit? I said, first of all, have you been physically harmed? That's where I start. No, it's not that. And then again, I don't probe too deeply, but I just try to create a safe space. And I say something like, it appears to me that there's something outside of track that is significant enough to, until you get that together, we can't really delve into the business deeply of being successful on track. We got to get this other impediment out of the way. So, can you help me with that? I say,
Right.
and I say, and you don't have to give me the whole story. Okay. Because I have people on this campus who are experts at everything. You just have to tell me enough of the story to where I can point you to the person whose department that is.
Right. Right.
You know,
That's
and
excellent.
and see, again, it may take a while, and you don't get everybody back who goes down that road. But I have athletes like that all the time. I had one really talented athlete recently, and she was just a super high anxiety person, problems all the time, and hard for her to get her life in order enough to where she could really be liberated to bring everything she had emotionally to the track, because she had all these other distractions. And so, like anything else, you're trying to, can you ever lift the burden completely off of a person? I don't think so as a coach, unless they're completely willing. But you can. There are interventions and help available even at high schools. In
Right.
college, have significantly more resources for those kind of things, for health and well-being and that kind of thing. So you just try to plug into the system as much as possible, and try to be as when it comes to their recovery. I think the chances of successes and winning stories have a lot to do with if they can kind of lead the process. If I can create a safe enough place where they're not afraid to like reach out and get help from somebody, then like we've got a real chance at turning that person around.
Right. Right. Making it, like you said, that safe place to where they know that they can tell you what's going on without you making them feel horrible about what they share with you.
Yeah, because Coach Tellez always said something that really stuck with me, and I think it's super important. I never forget that. Latrell Sprewell choked PJ Carlissimo for a reason. I don't know what it was, but it must have been bad. And I can imagine, I have my theories. I imagine his manhood was called into account, or perhaps there was, a racial epithet involved, but a line was crossed. And Coach Tellez said, never judge an athlete athletes judge themselves. And I'll tell you what he meant. It took me a while even to figure this out. This is kind of like, because the first time I heard it, I got never judge an athlete, but it was the athletes judge themselves that I didn't get. What he meant was athletes aren't passing judgment. What he meant was never judge an athlete. Athletes' performances judge them. So see, athletes, whether you like it or not, your performances are going to cast judgment upon you anyway. So they don't need any further judgment. And the creation of a safe space has a lot to do with that.
Right, right, right. Now, you also do this creation of the expectation of the level of effort, the level of excellence that's required at practices. I remember one time I was talking to you about when kids don't hit their times and things like that, and you told me to just send them home. There's no point in hammering through a workout if you're not meeting the goal of that workout and making, some high school coaches, like if a kid isn't hit their time, they tell them they have to do an extra one. And your philosophy is the opposite. Tell us about that.
Well, okay. Well, in that instance, usually if first of all, that's not just any workout. Some workouts are more important than others. Some are landmark workouts that perhaps you're trying to get some kind of sense of how prepared they are for the next task or the next meet or the meet 2 weeks away or whatever. There, as you know, there are sort of sometimes you make certain workouts. Test workouts or framing workouts that from which you draw conclusions. Like sometimes it's as simple as, well, I have 5 people. Now, which 4 am I going to pick to run the 4x4 this weekend? So sometimes it's that, that simple. In those situations, when a person doesn't meet their times, it's usually not effort related. It's usually that they've misrun the workout or whatever. They've run the first one too hard or whatever. And so when that happens, nothing you do is going to bring that workout back. They're done. Like they've already made the mistake in the workout. They ran number 1 and 2 too hard, can't answer the rest interval for the 3rd rep. I mean, they've done themselves in. So I just, at that point, go home, come back. We'll try this again tomorrow, or we'll try this again next week. The other thing that I've seen before, sometimes athletes actually undermine a session and deliberately undermine a session so that they won't have to do it. And I'm not going to play that either. So what I do is when I just tell them, I said, if you can't get through this workout is going to get done. Clearly it's not going to happen today. So come back tomorrow. And boy, that gets their attention because they don't pull that stunt. They know that's not going to go away. So sometimes it's like that. Now that's sort of a test of wills and kind of a negative thing. When it's the kind of thing that falls into the circumstances where it's a kid maybe who's, just trying too hard, or they're not very smart about how they approach the workout, when a workout starts to go into fail mode, there's nothing you can do because, we run at pretty high intensity. So once they start falling apart, they're not all of a sudden going to get it together.
Right. Now, let's talk about that, the high intensities, because that was a question that was submitted for you. So you don't do a lot of tempo runs?
Well, we do a lot of tempo runs, but they're what do you call intensive tempo runs, which are, we start about 85 to 90% of max on that. See, we don't waste. We get right to race specific tempos the very first day of practice. Like we don't sit around, like if you're a 60-second quarter miler, we don't run really anything slower than 64-second tempo. Now that doesn't mean it's a 64-second 400. That could mean it's a 48-second 300 or a 24-second 200 or an 18-second 150, but it's at PR pace +4. So if you're a 60-second quarter miler, we are not, capital NOT, we are not going to run 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38-second 200s. We're not going to do it because a 33-second 200 is a 66-second quarter, and we ain't doing it. That doesn't look anything like a 60-second quarter. A 32-second 100, which is a 64-second pace, that's the slowest we go, and we build up. So we're never doing mindless, slow, poor posture running in training, ever. Because the thing about training that people forget is, as much as you are training an energy system, you are also beholden to the laws of motor learning. So training motor learning as much as you're training an energy system. And basically motor learning states that if I do something often enough with enough density, my body is going to learn that as a movement pattern. So I'm not going to run a whole lot of 34-second 200s for a 60-second quarter mile because I don't want them to get accustomed to 68-second pace. We're trying to run 59.
Right.
So a lot of time and a lot of density wasted at non-specific tempos does not prepare you for the demands of performance. It actually detrains you, and I don't want to detrain my athletes. I want to prepare them for the specific demands of competition.
Do you have a philosophy of not going over 400 meters for your sprint and quarter mile group?
Well, more or less, but that it's very simple. Like it's not something I came up with arbitrarily, and it's, I'm not on my high horse about it. I just want quality, and if you can run a 450 and it be good, I'm all for it. But again, see, if you're going to run a 450, you have to come through in 64. If by running a 450 you go slower than 64 for my 60s, I'm coaching a 60-second quarter miler now. We're not doing it. And 500 the same. If you're going to run a 500, we're coming through in 64 because that's the lowest we're going to. But what happens? Come on, you know what happens. You run a 500, they're going to come through in 72. And we're not going to do that. I'm going to frame the workout. I'm going to set the workout up where we're running the tempos that are required to train a 60-second athlete to run 59.
Right.
Well, it's very simple. So if someone could run up, if my 60-second quarter miler, I do 400, 300, 200, but we build up to it so that when they run it the first time, they're running 64, 48, 32. That's what they do.
Right. Right.
So you can't do that the first day, but you can sure as heck run 150s in 18. Sorry, excuse me, 150s in 24, which is 32-second pace. The first day of practice, I can run 150s in 24, and I'm training at 64-second pace. So I'm preparing them for that 4-3-2, which is still 8 weeks away, so that when we do that workout, we can run 64, 48, 32.
Right. Right. And
I never think about volume ever. I only think about intensity. And by thinking about intensity, the volumes and rests are dictated to me.
Perfectly said. Yes. The volume and the rest is dictated based on the intensity that's being required in the workout. And when you talk about that goes back to the attention to detail. Some coaches don't pay attention to the detail in understanding the amount of rest that's required for a max velocity workout per se. Correct. So like if we say that someone's doing 50-meter sprints, but they do a walk back and go again, then now we're not really doing max velocity because there's no recovery and they're not able to go at that 95% intensity that's required for it to be correct.
Yes, no, that's exactly right. And it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out. When I had to pass my level 2 test, way back when, all that stuff was on the test and I just kept the charts. Like people way smarter than coaches figured that out. I'm not going to violate the rules. Gary Winkler figured this out. I'm going to do what he says. If I'm running a certain time at a certain pace, it requires this amount of rest. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I can't call something whatever the hell I want to call it.
Let's talk about that, Coach. Because all over Twitter, it gets on my nerves. Coaches will say that they're doing one type of workout, and it's not that. You're just calling it that.
There is a clinical, I'm going to bore the crap out of everybody right now. There's a clinical definition for types of work. And like when you take the summer academy course through USTFCCCCA that we teach over the summer, like these are the types of work. When I'm doing training, I follow those myself. If I want to do a particular kind of work and call it a particular thing, then it has to meet those boundary requirements. And I'm not going to violate the rules. The rules are the rules. Now, can you do speed development? Yes. Can you do extensive tempo? Yes, you can. But extensive tempo has defining boundaries and limits in terms of the volume of the workout, in terms of the volume of the reps you do, in terms of the rest interval. It's all there. People way smarter than track coaches figured it out. So I'm going to conform to those lists.
Right. Right.
And by the way, when I started conforming to those lists, as opposed to doing my own thing, my team started running way better.
Same. Same. Because like you said, people smarter than us figured it out, and the formula is there. It's just like making a cake. Okay, I just want to take baking soda out of the equation just because I don't feel like using it. Well, my cake is going to be flat. It's not going to come out right.
Well, I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to leave the baking soda and I'm going to put 4 extra eggs because I like eggs.
Right.
And then I'm gonna like
have a gooey cake. You know,
well, it doesn't turn out right.
It doesn't turn out right. And the same thing happens with the workouts. And then people want to, say that the kids are choking or the kids are getting injured for XYZ. But let's look at what we're doing as coaches. That's a part of being a coach. We have to put the effort in to learn the information and not only learn it, but learn it and apply it. There's so many people, like you said, that come to clinics and they sit through, they're not taking notes, and then they go back and then they do whatever they want with the workouts, putting it together however they want to.
And I'm not trying to be high-minded here. I'm just telling people, testimonially speaking, I go to lectures and I listen. And I went to level 2 school and I had to try to take a test and pass just like everybody else does. And I still use the same material. I use my level 2 stuff now to keep me in line and to protect me from me.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody needs boundaries. There are rules. In football, there are certain things you do in the organization of your week. And you have to, and everyone knows that. And not only do they know it, they respect it. In basketball, there is a way to organize your practice week. Guess what? In track, same thing. You can't just do whatever. There's a way to put your week together. It requires a certain amount of high intensity work. It requires a certain amount of more 400 specific tempo work. It requires rest.
Oh, let's talk about that. That when I started incorporating rest in, game changer. But we think, we think more is more, but really less is more. When I started putting in like that Wednesday recovery day, I saw tremendous gains. And then that kind of, the slow tempo stuff is what some coaches do on that day, and they call that the recovery day. But if we just give them that day off, then now you see the effort and you see the body, the injuries going away. You see the body able to perform and give you what you need on the days that you're requiring the intense workouts.
Right. And because here's the thing, if you're going to train speed, which it is required for sprinters, the levels of work are so intense that rest is required, not only between reps, but between sessions and whatever. Right. So, and we took a little bit different tempo approach than you. Like Wednesday, we would train, but we wouldn't do much running. Like we wouldn't give them the day off. Like it's an active recovery day. We're doing body circuits.
Medicine ball.
We're doing hurdle mobility circuits, or so they're still getting a training effect, but it's still regenerative because we're not out there continuing to pound them. Do I like running in practice? Yes. Do I like running hard in practice? Yes. But that has to be planned and coordinated with bouts of rest so that on the backside of the recovery, you can come back and hit again.
Right. And I did the same thing. It was more of a circuit day on Wednesday to where you're not pounding, you're not doing running, doing medicine ball, hurdle mobility, abdominal circuits, things like that. But so all of this ties into the attention to detail that's required as a coach. And when you mentioned earlier that you were an architect before your coaching life, how did that play? I mean, I'm sure that played into your attention to detail because you are a mad scientist. You came up with the wicket drill that everybody uses. And not all of us use it the right way. Talk about the attention to detail that's required when implementing the wicket drill. Well, first tell us, what was the goal? What was your goal and the purpose of the wicket drill?
Well, having been mentored by Coach Tellez, who is just a magical and wonderful biomechanist, he just taught us all a short tolerance for bad running. And I've never had a sprinter ever in 36 years that did not overstride when they came into our program. So in other words, all kids nationwide are taught. In fact, it's enabled and praised. They're all overstriders. So every single athlete that I've ever had has to be taught to bring their stride in underneath themselves to where it feels like they're marching in place. Okay. All right. So, you get sick of seeing bad running and get sick of seeing bad running and get sick of seeing reaching and get sick of seeing overstriding. And finally you snap one day, like I snapped one day in Houston traffic. I was living in A-Leaf and I snapped, and I moved the next day. We moved to Montrose. So we could be in the center of town. And it was, so one day I just snapped. I was like, I'm done. And I said, what can I do to make sure, like, I don't want to see this overstriding anymore. So I didn't design the wicket drill around it, but this is what we had, which is like a croquet wicket. So I figured that if I put those down on the track at certain intervals, and Coach Stamps, who's listening in tonight, and Carl, who is listening tonight, they were in the what's the word? The inaugural group that this got
tested out on.
They were the test group. So I figured, okay. So we went out and two or three trials, you can begin to get spacing ideas on it. So I pretty well figured that out. But what I noticed is people aren't going to want to step on the wickets. So instead of in the strike position, in the strike position, instead of swinging the leg out and stepping down, they put their foot right down. And I said, oh, well, this is cool. And then we just sort of developed it from there. But so the idea was to eliminate overstriding and put them in a tall sprint posture. And of course, like any activity or drill or learning sequence, people got out of it what they put into it. So people who concentrated on stepping down and then could repeat that same feeling on the open track without the wickets, they learned. It requires active learning and engagement. The drill won't teach you anything unless you're actively learning it. Like if you're a slave to the drill and not thinking about how you're feeling or what you're doing, and then I put you out on the open track, you go right back to doing what you do. So
exactly.
So very quickly, and it didn't take us long, 2 or 3 years. We started with them up. And then I realized, well, sprinting, of course, isn't about stepping over anything. Sprinting is about stepping down. So we started laying the rail down on the track. And then now I don't even use those anymore. The reason I used them in the first place at Tennessee is we had a zillion of them and I could put them to use. Now I just use this. I buy this at Lowe's and paint it white. So it just needs
And
to
it
be.
serves the same purpose?
Yeah, because they don't want to step on it. It's just something big enough where they'll step down between them, which is what we want. They don't want to step down on top of them. And it just puts you in the right sprint, and you really learn how to sprint. It's a very aggressive drill. And, we put out 18 of them. So it requires, if I have the right spacing, which I'm really good at, it requires a 6-step run in because you cannot get to slat 12 through 18 without a 6-stride run in if you have the spacing right. The other thing I only use 18 because the drill, in my opinion, in my application for the purposes for which I use it, and this doesn't apply to anyone out there. You use it however you want. But for my purposes, the way it was designed and what I want, I'm not going to do less than 18 strides because from stride 12 to stride 18, they are maxed out. They cannot go any faster. But like if I have 6, 8, 10, the drill doesn't serve its purpose, but because we haven't got to max yet.
Because it's a max velocity drill, correct?
It is a max velocity, super aggressive, pin your ears back and hit it activity. As for me, as the way I deploy it.
Right. So what about people who use them for other, different ways?
Easy. If you feel it, if you see it, if you get it, if you understand it, if the idea clicks, run with it and trust your instincts.
But the cue over the wickets is to march, to feel like you're marching. Step down.
Step down. Coach Winkler says sprinting is stepping down from above, and that's exactly what it is. Sprinting is not about stepping over anything. Sprinting is about stepping down from above and doing so very violently, very athletically, very aggressively. Now, once you're vertical, really excellent sprint posture to the sprinter feels exactly like marching in place, not sort of like marching in place, not kind of reminds me of marching in place. It feels internally to the athlete exactly like marching in place. Now, marching in place very aggressively, very rapidly, very athletically, very violently, but marching in place nonetheless.
Right. And I think that goes back, we're talking about more than a coach and we're talking about mental aspects of coaching, but some of that is understanding, speaking in a language that the athlete can understand. We can be saying the right thing, but if the athlete doesn't understand what it is that we're looking for, then it really serves no purpose. So helping them understand why marching in place, because a lot of athletes, when I try to help them with wicket drills, they're thinking, I'm trying to go that way, right? I'm trying to move forward. And really, from what you're describing, I'm trying to push down. And by pushing down more powerfully, it's going to propel me forward. I'm not trying to move and reach. And that's where the overstriding comes from, trying to reach and get down the track. There we go. Tell us about it, Coach.
Carl, the greatest posture of all time, all he's doing is marching in place. And all Bolt is doing is marching in place. He's trying to push himself up. The horizontal takes care of itself. It's the vertical component of sprinting. That's why good sprinters are bouncy. They're pushing straight down to push themselves straight up. They're not worried about going that way. They're trying to push themselves up that way. And that's all Bolt is doing. And that's all Lewis is doing, is they're blasting down into the track vertically so they can push themselves up vertically. They're not trying to go that way. They're trying to go that way. It's counterintuitive. And it's just like anything else. It's teaching. The race has enough complexity on its own. Okay. I've never had a sprinter who needed the race model explained to them in a more complex way. Their sense of what the race model was already way too complex that inhibited performance. There's an inverse relationship between complexity and aggression. And I
Right.
want absolute unbridled aggression. So why am I going to put a lot of complexity into the race model? We're not. So, coaches, when it comes to, the 100-meter race model in most activity, the 110-meter race, hurdle race model, the 100-meter hurdle race model, they need that model simplified, not made more complex. So even though the 100-meter race pattern, if you're talking to a room of biomechanists or you're talking to a room of coaches, you can be fairly complex in your nuances and in the way you dissect the race, but you cannot talk to an athlete about it that way because that's already how they think of it. You have to simplify it so they can be more violent in the carrying out of that. Here's a football analogy. I love football and I love football analogies. Javon Curse was a disruptive pass rusher because he read one key which determined if he took the quarterback's head off or not. Tight end blocks down, it's a run. Tight end blocks up, I go. Unleashing hell. Okay. If Javon Curse had to read four keys, do you think he would have been as violent as he was? No, he wouldn't have, because he's reading four keys. You got time to read one key and hit it. And that's kind of the analogy. The race model has to be simplified.
Wow. Simple. Keep it simple, right? Keep
Well,
it
remember,
simple.
yeah, keep this, and that doesn't mean we're oversimplifying, but remember, every athlete I've ever had, I don't know your experience. I don't know the experience of the coaches who are listening. I've never had an athlete that came to me with a race model concept. It was already too complex. So my job as a coach was to intervene, strip that down, and make it more simple and more manageable because I needed more pushing and more aggression.
Right.
And that's what's
Right.
lacking in race models is pushing and aggression.
Right. And pushing, period, in
Yeah.
track and field. Just
Yeah.
pushing, there's a lot of things that we teach that are counter, intuitive, but it's like you said, simple, keep it simple, focus on good posture, focus on pushing, and some of the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah, and particularly if you have good visual support, like you have good pictures, good video to show them, someone on the team who can do it, so you can say, watch Susie, like any visuals that you can pull out to help support what you're saying. And like I used to be able to demonstrate, and I can't demonstrate. I can't demonstrate anymore. Like I was a terrible athlete, but I could move well. So I could kind of demonstrate, but those days are over. So now I have to rely like on video or someone on the team that I pick who does a particular thing well, or I show a picture. Shockingly, still pictures do a lot,
Yeah.
because I'll pose them like a statue in a posture and go, do you feel this when you run? And they'll go, no. And I say, that's because you're not doing it. So
Right.
if you can't pose in a posture, if you can't pose in a still position that's right, you have zero chance of posing in that posture under movement circumstances.
Exactly. Exactly. And then that goes to what you said too with telling them to march. If you don't teach them to march, like something as simple as that, making sure they understand what you mean by marching. Let's break it down. Do the march and feel what marching actually feels like, so then they can translate that into the run. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So let's go to some questions. Let's see if we have any. If you have any questions, I see Damani Shakur says, "Hey, what's up?"
Hey, Damani.
Someone calls you the GOAT here. Action, speed, track, the GOAT. And then someone says, did it bother you as a person or a coach when you would lose an athlete because you couldn't save them? And how did you learn to navigate that through the years?
Well, sure. I remember every failure I've ever had, not just with people, but at meets and like we dropped the baton at the last regional qualifier that I coached at in Sacramento, and I just like beat myself up for a long time because we prepared well for it. And so I remember every failure of execution and every failure that I ever had. But I temper it with hope because, see, I don't want to take myself out of the game because then I won't be any good to anybody.
Right.
Yes, it hurts. Yes. Did I, could I have done something better? Yes. Do I feel remorse that I didn't? Yes. Hell yes. I took an L there. And any good coach is going to take L's. And so if you really believe in the kids and you believe in human nature, I think you have to pull up short of taking yourself out of the game, because because athletes really do flow through their coach. Like, I don't think coaches are more important, by the way, but think of it this way. I have, say, 16 kids come through in a 4-year period, but in 4 years, they're gone. But I'm still there, and a new group of 16 comes in. So people always need good teachers. People always need good coaches. So believe in yourself. Don't let the L's whip you. Define yourself by the things you do well. Let your L's motivate you to maybe sharpen up or correct where you needed to correct. Like, I've tried to kind of improve from my mistakes that I could understand. Like, when I really know I blow it, I try to make an adjustment. So next time, maybe I'll do better. But my God, this nation is not overrun with helpful coaches and helpful teachers. We have too few of them. There's a shortage. So the answer is yes. I learned to navigate that by wanting to stay in the game because I felt still somehow that I can do more good than not. And, maybe they keep me sane, more than I keep them sane too. So it works both ways.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And then Lakia Poston says the Alpha. Do you remember Coach Boatwright from Illinois, Coach Anderson?
Yes.
I think Aaliyah Brown may have run for his team, but this is his daughter, Lakia Boatwright.
Hi, Lakia.
All right. Hassan Stamp says, you better preach.
Hassan Stamps has the same nickname for me that the great Kareem Jabbar did. I call him Cap. He was captain of our team. He was captain of the Tennessee Volunteers when he was a sophomore.
Oh,
and
wow.
He was captain of one of our national championship team in 2000 and in 2001 and in 2002 indoor. So,
wow.
And is a great coach in his own right. But I call him Cap. Same thing the Lakers called Kareem.
Awesome. And then Action Speed Track says, I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Loving this conversation. If you are loving this conversation, please go ahead and share it share it on your pages, share it with friends, and share this knowledge, because these are conversations that must happen. Talking about the intangibles in track and field and how it all is correlated. We can't separate the mental from the physical. The two impact the other. When people ask the question, how much of sport is mental? Well, the mental part affects the physical. So it's all mental. And if you really look at it that way, because the way that I think and the way that my body is, my mind is operating is going to affect the effort that I'm able to give at practice. Those days when we talked about athletes not being able to hit certain marks. Maybe it's something going on at home that's caused them anxiety or problems that they've experienced. And I know today I was driving home from practice and I felt this feeling in my gut, and it hit me as I was driving. I said, this is what some athletes feel when they leave practice. You talk about track being a safe place. And I was at practice today, and for those few hours that I was there, I didn't think about the pain that was waiting for me when I leave. And as soon as I got in the car, it hit me in the stomach like a punch in the gut. And I just remembered everything. And I said, for all of these years, I've never truly had that feeling. I knew there were things that kids didn't want to go home to, but to know how that really felt.
That's deep, Coach. That's deep, Coach. That's big time. That's big time stuff. But I think
go ahead, Coach.
I think sometimes you can always, when it comes to competitive anxiety, and I don't know why no one ever frames it like this. You can always invoke bravery and always invoke courage. And you can explain, look, I know you're scared, but look, we're going to be brave. We're going to go out there. We're going to face the music. We're going to do our thing. And,
Yep.
you know, kids understand that.
And telling them that it's okay. You
Yeah,
know, because there's this big fear of failure or of losing. Number one, I always tell my athletes, we're not competing against other athletes. You're trying to get better. You're trying to PR. So you're competing against yourself in a sense, you know, so don't worry about the place that you get in the meet. Did you get better today? Did you get better?
you're competing against yourself. You're competing against the race itself. The 100-meter race pattern in and of itself is a worthy opponent, trying to master that pattern. Then you're competing against other people as well. So that's why track. This is what bothers me so much in the United States. Americans hate track. Russians hate track. People in Great Britain love track. People in Japan love track. Track athletes have more than the courage of boxers. And everyone admires the courage of boxers. They invoke it, they notice it, they praise it, because it's hard to climb in the ring against somebody else. And we all know that, even if we haven't boxed.
Right.
Yet, if you're a boxer, it's 1 against 1. If you're a track athlete, it's 7 against 1. Track athletes have more courage than boxers, but nobody. You watch these jerks on ESPN like Matt Millen and these turd analysts, and they say track guys are soft. BS. I've coached He-Man first team All-American tailbacks, and I loved him. I won't mention his name. First team AP All-American, 207 yards against Florida. All-American, Mr. Everything on a national championship team. At a track meet, he completely nutted. He told me, Coach, I never feel like this in football. Why? Because I have 10 guys have my back in football. In track, it's me. Track is the bravest, the strongest, the most wonderful, and they never come back from the Clark area and say I can't do it. They face the music, and that's who we are, and that's what we do, and we don't get credit for it, and ESPN will never give us credit for it. But we're the brave, we're the magnificent, we're the proud. It's the greatest sport on earth, in spite of what you hear. So don't believe the noise. I love football. I'm not anti-football, but what I resent is its dominant place in the marketplace is such that they don't even have representatives of the sport willing to express that the greatest football players of all time have been the track guys.
Right.
They won't ever speak those words.
Right.
But we all know it's true.
Right. Exactly.
The cats that can run track and play football, those are the difference makers.
Exactly. Exactly. Now, when you brought us to this other area that I wasn't going to dive into, but I want you to talk about the status of track, the state of track and field right now, especially with programs getting canceled and conferences are canceled, but football is happening pretty much. You know, what are your thoughts on the state of track and field right now, Coach?
I'm pessimistic, and don't look. I love track, but I'm pessimistic. I'm beat down with the neglect, the lack of interest, the ever increasing heaping on of yet more budget, more dollars, more talent, more coaches concentrated in a single sport. And when you're in the galaxy and there's a supernova, it swallows up all the stars. And it's ridiculous to me that there's enough resources and enough talent to do quite well all around. It's just not I mean, we have people building, $125 million additions to their weight room that aren't needed. It's just an arms race. Spend that money more equitably throughout your athletic department because it's good for people. You know, Black females alone, track and field by itself accounts for 42% of minority females in the NCAA, one sport. So for every 100 females in the NCAA, 42 of them are running track cross country. Okay. So, you know, when you start, and I realize women's track is not in danger, but men's track is, and I resent that highly, and it hurts me to my soul because it's the first, you know, it's the second college sport I ever started watching was men's college track. And it's a phenomenal sport, yet, you know, programs are being dropped, you know, budgets are being consolidated. The COVID doesn't help because, see, that now gives people the budgetary excuse to drop. See, this is where I'm cynical, and I'm not right. This is my cynicism coming out, and I'm not a cynical person, but I am about this. In the COVID environment, here's what's happened. If you ever wanted to drop track and you were an AD, see, now you have your excuse. Oh, we didn't bring any money this year. Bye. And don't think people aren't doing that. So is it budgetary? Yeah, I'm sure somebody's, you know, could show you their books, and it is. But in some places, I think track has been targeted.
Wow.
Why? Because it's not very highly valued in the United States. It's certainly not highly valued among athletic directors, among that population.
Right.
So I think it's a target. I think it's a victim. I think it's in the crosshairs. I don't want to think that. I hate being paranoid, but if Clemson can drop men's track, then anybody in the country can, because they're doing really good in football.
Yeah. And, you know, like we've talked about before, they have a track meet that brings in a good amount of money. So
I think it's a sad state of affairs. So what can we do? This is all I don't know. We just all have to be the most dynamic, optimistic, helpful, competent, great teaching people that we can be. And we just have to be so relevant and valued that maybe it keeps our job safe. So I don't know. I don't know what else to do. So I don't know.
Yeah. We have a few more questions, but what we're going to do is I'll ask Coach Anderson to continue to answer these questions, and we'll post them. So continue, if you have additional questions, post them in the comments. Coach Anderson and myself will reply to the questions. He can give me the answers. I'll talk to him. So don't be afraid. We will get to you, Track Star Dave, the old jumper. Also, hi, Jordy. So we will respond. Go ahead and share this video. This was such a great conversation, not just about physical workouts, but about all of the aspects of track and field and actually sport. And it applies to life. So when we talk about more than a coach, we're not just talking about sports, but coaches that can help people get from where they are to where they want to be, whether that's in athletics, but it all transfers throughout life. You look at jobs, and a lot of them want to know if you were an athlete because they know you learn through things through athletics that will translate into all parts of your life. So you're more than athletes. We're more than coaches. And together, we're making a difference in this world. I want you to go ahead and share this video. Continue to comment in the comment section. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. We have a great lineup. Coach Anderson, thank you so much for being the kickoff for this series of More Than a Coach. We have Joanna D. Hayes coming up. next week, and we have Tiana Bartoletta coming up, Carl Lewis coming up, and then we also have Leroy Burrell joining the lineup. So this is a power-packed conversation that will continue. If you have coaches that you want to recommend, come on to More Than a Coach, then make sure you send that in the comment section, and we will reach out to additional coaches. Coach Anderson, go ahead. You have something to say?
That's 4 Olympic champions and me.
You are the GOAT. You are amazing. And actually,
Burrell, Lewis, Bartoletta, Hayes, all Olympic gold medalists in memoir.
So you're in great company. And like you said, and that's another part of this. Some people think that you have to be an Olympian to be a great coach. And I don't think that's the case. There are Olympians that are great coaches, because all of the people I just named are amazing coaches. But I think you're an amazing coach as well. But you learn from Coach Tellez, and you absorb the information and you apply it and you pay attention. So I definitely think you're in good. You deserve to be amongst that lineup.
That's awesome. So,
I am Rakaya Gibson. I can help with anybody who has questions about getting through mental blockages with your athletes. I'm here for it. That is my passion, to help with those things. And also, even if these things translate into other parts of life, reach out to me, Rakaya Gibson, on YouTube. You can leave comments in the comment section. Also, I want to let you guys know really quickly about my foundation, Do It for Damani. You can visit doitfordamani.com. There's a track meet in honor of Damani next Friday. And next Friday, we're asking everybody to wear red. So whether it's at practice or at competitions, wear red. Post it on social media with the hashtag Do It for Damani, go red, or red out, I'm sorry. And visit the Damani Gibson Foundation. And if you want to make a donation to the foundation, that opportunity is available as well. Thank you so much, Coach Anderson. Thank you, everybody who's watched. And until next week, next Wednesday, same time, 6 p.m., we will be here live with our next guest. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.